At the end of the most colorful episode in GTA 4, yes, I'm talking about the Ballad of Gay Tony, the main character of this game, so Luis Lopez, faces a very difficult decision. He has an opportunity to get it out the mud, which he found himself partially, or rather largely, screw it, in 100% because of his boss, Tony Prince. So a guy whose brilliant business strategy allowed him to get in more debt than drunk Lance with Diaz and Roman with all the thugs in Hove Beach combined. See, Tony, before the story of the episode even began, seriously indebted himself with the Ancelotti Mafia family, and as all the money Tony earned was immediately squandered away on various intoxicants and anti-anxiety pills for him or his degenerate boyfriend Evan, Tony was way overdue on his payments. This resulted in the Ancelottis sending one of their capos, Rocco. And no, I don't mean the adult movie actor Rocco, or actually, forget that. So Tony was in debt with the Ancelottis, so they sent one of their capos, Rocco, who along with his chubby sidekick Vince, made Tony do some of their dirty work, which for the most part was pretty dangerous. Tony was very far from being a hitman, so to fulfill Rocco's wishes, he frequently was using his tough bodyguard, Luis Lopez, who often liked to hit on some proper girls at Masonet 9. I don't actually know why I added it, gotta be some weird habit of mine. One time, Tone figured out that he wants to buy $2 million worth of diamonds, so he can sell them for a profit, with hopes that it'll help him get out of debt. Yeah, sounds like a good plan, right? However, as per usual in GTA series, everything went very wrong, and the diamonds got stolen. Granted, soon Tone and Luis managed to retrieve the stones. However, they were no use for them then, as some Irish pricks, along with some Serbian psychopath, kidnapped Gracie, so the Ancelotti's boss's daughter. And since Mr. Ancelotti was convinced that his daughter's kidnapping was solely the fault of Luis and Tony, he ordered them to get her back. And in order to do it, they had to give up the diamonds to the Serbian and the Irish posse. So basically, Tony was still in the mud, and his debts were still the size of America. Oh, and one more thing. Just in case somebody doesn't know why on earth the Ancelotti's boss blamed Luis and Tony for the fact that someone kidnapped his daughter, it was because the kidnappers demanded the diamonds as ransom. The diamonds that were currently in Tony's possession, and Tony was in debt with the Ancelottis. So the boss of these halfwits figured out that it would be the easiest way to handle it. I mean, that Gracie will be liberated, because the kidnappers will get the ice from Tony and the Ancelottis won't even have to spend a single penny. The plan is also cheeky, because that won't pay Tony's debts, so the Mafia will still be able to use him and demand proper protection money. Safe to say that the strategists at the Ancelottis are almost as good as those of the Ferrari team in F1. Meanwhile, there was another problem in the shape of Ray Bulgarin, who for some reason made up a story in his empty head that those diamonds had belonged to him all along. Yeah, and also that Luis and Tone allegedly robbed him. We all know, however, that was pure bullcrap. Tony and Luis bought this ice off some cook in a fair deal. The two had no idea of the origins of those diamonds or to whom they once belonged. I mean, if you're at Green Grocer's, do you ask the shop assistant for a full name and address of a person who seated him? Come on, of course not. Our boys ain't done nothing wrong here. They brought the money, bought the ice, and that's it. In any case, since Ray could forget about retrieving the valuable stones, cause they were gone for good, he was pissed not gonna lie, he was really pissed. So Ray had two options here. Option A, let it all go and not waste any more time on this whole affair. You know, why cry over spilt milk? It'd be better to just let it go and find another money-making opportunity available in Liberty City. Drugs, heists, kidnapping some T-Rex from a nearby museum. You know, this is America, Liberty City, a land of opportunity. But Ray knew that he's also got the option B, to focus all of his forces on poor Tony and Luis, who were completely insignificant and who just accidentally got themselves involved in this whole diamond thing. Obviously do it so no one will say that the almighty Bulgarin did not do anything about the fact that someone allegedly robbed him. So the answer is obvious. Option A seems a very wise choice. Meanwhile, a responsible, mature, and clean-thinking gang boss, Ray Bulgarin, without hesitation, chose option B. So Ray went to the Ancelottis and demanded blood. And considering that Luis and Tony have not been in favor of Ancelotti had enough. Mainly enough of Tony, actually, just to be clear. From Ancelotti's point of view, it simply went too far. Tony once got asked to help the Chinese, which did not end up going so well. Then Gracie got snatched, allegedly because of the diamonds that Tony was in possession of, which at first was just an excuse to blame them. But I guess that the Ancelottis started to actually believe it at some point. And then, in the end, some angry Russian comes to them and voices his complaints. Quite audibly too, which also was caused by Tony's actions. And since Rocco was the one delegated to take care of Tony's debt, he's also lost in his boss's eyes. And then Rocco got creative, and no cap, seriously, Rocco had a plan. He figured that if either Tone or Luis died, then the angry Ruski and the old man would calm down. Cause you know what it's like with those crazy mobsters. Nothing calms them down better than exacting revenge on some completely blameless fella that ain't done nothing wrong. And Rocco, since Tone was a hysterical junkie, preferred to work with Luis. See, Rocco wanted to run the clubs with Luis, which would be taken over by them once Tony ends up at the bottom of the West River. So basically, Rocco's plan was that first, Luis had to cap Tony. Then, Ancelotti and Bulgarin would find out about it, and the hope was that his death would satisfy them. And they would start celebrating the fact that they managed to offload their frustration on someone. Everyone will be happy. Rocco will get off his boss's hit list, plus his pockets will be getting filled with the money from the clubs. And at first, Luis actually wanted to cap Tony, but he changed his mind at the last moment. Then, Luis the Terminator single-handedly mashed up a whole army of Bulgarin's goons and killed Bulgarin himself before performing a spectacular celebration in the shape of base jumping off an about-to-explode burning plane. We don't know what about the Ancelottis and their wrath at Tony, but my guess is that the old man just ate a bowl of some proper spaghetti that put him in a good mood and he decided to let it go. And since Bulgarin was gone now, merciful Ancelotti just snapped his fingers at it and left them be. Either way, Tony survived, and the Ancelottis did not hurt him. We know that because we later meet him in GTA Online. So to summarize this, either the Ancelottis actually left him in peace, or he skipped town to get away from them. All this raises a question, whether Luis did the right thing by sparing this ever-drugged-up fool, and didn't just put a bullet in his tiny brain. Was it the right choice to not go with Rocco's plan? Let's kick off with the arguments in favor of Luis killing Tony at the end of the story. So basically, the first reason that supports Tony's death is Tony himself, or rather, what kind of a person Tony was. See, Tony, during the events of the Ballad, is a completely irresponsible, hysterical, and unpredictable junkie. Additionally, Tony was in a relationship with that halfwit Evan, who obviously had a lot of great traits, such as making sure that Tony's wallet wasn't too heavy, and other things like that. The worst thing was, however, that those bad habits of Evan were transferring onto Tone, who thanks to Evan fell in love with drugs, which completely washed his brain. Tony became completely irresponsible. He first would squander all the money away on stupid whims, and then would borrow money from gangsters, for whom Luis had to work to somehow compensate the missing money for them, just as it was with that maniac, Maury. Moreover, Tony was totally unpredictable. I think that it's best portrayed by one situation in the game from the mission Ladies' Night.
Yeah, and she never made you into a junkie, okay? I mean, she's not a bad person. Okay, she's not a murdering, greedy psychopath like me. She's so hard, if you can get past the accent, okay? But she made you into a useless old queen to act out on blowing pills to notice his business is going to shit.
Oh, here we go, huh? Here we fucking go, huh? Oh, I see it in your eyes. You're embarrassing me. You see me and think, oh, this is it. This is the moment to put me down. This is the moment when the apprentice takes over, huh? Oh, man. You think I'm done? You're not so tough, Luis.
And you're not so smart, you dumb junkie. Fuck.
Oh, yeah, fuck you, Luis.
Come on, Tony. Chill out.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. You're not the one with the problem. I am.
Tony, what the fuck are you doing?
No, I'm holding you back. I see that now. I see that now. The closest thing I've had to a son. I'm sorry, Luis. I love you. Tony, goodbye.
Tony, come on, man.
Goodbye. I love you.
Tone first wants to kill Luis, just because he told him the sad truth about him. And then, we got a plot twist, and all of a sudden, Tony changes his mind and wants to shoot himself. And he would, if not for the fact that the fool forgot to take off the safety. So Luis was a very sentimental guy. Not only did he not shoot his ass, he also rejected the prospect of making more money. Cause if Luis agreed to work with Rocco, whose plan, which let's assume would work out, and which at first glance seemed okay, he could finally focus on making money for himself, rather than constantly covering his boss's debts. Luis would then be working for, okay, maybe a bit dumb, but definitely quite organized mafia family, Well, definitely better organized than that fool Tony. And so far, all that looks very bad when it comes to whether Tony deserved mercy from his bodyguard, who, in the end, decided to keep him alive. But hold your horses. Let's not make any rash judgments, as there are two sides to this coin. Cause, first of all, Luis couldn't even be sure that Rocco's plan would work. Cause Ray was as pissed as a bull upon seeing a red rag. Ray not only wanted to take out Tony, but also Luis. Overall, Ray was a revenge-driven asshole. Remember how he wouldn't leave poor Nico alone, who actually didn't do anything wrong? Ray, yet again, made up a story in his head, just like with the Diamonds, Tony, and Luis thing. I'm mentioning that to point out that Ray just liked to kill. This dude was a freaking psychopath. Even if nobody betrayed him but looked at him wrong, Ray would immediately be swapping facts in his head, so he would end up thinking that the person actually betrayed him or owed him money, just to have a reason or a strong argument to cut off that person's cojones. That being said, there was a big chance that even if Luis killed Tony, Ray would still put a bullet in his ass too. And yes, there was a moment when Ray wanted Luis to join his gang and stop working for that. However, that was before Ray made up a story about Tony and Luis robbing him. So it's hard to believe that if Luis killed Tony, it would change anything from Ray's point of view. But if we look at both options, which one was the better choice? To kill Tony and see how the Ancelottis and Bulgarin react and hope they don't whack Luis anyway? Or declare a war against Bulgarin and his powerful syndicate, not to mention the Ancelottis, who were also pissed off at Tony's for all this mess? If we take a rational look at it, Luis should kill Tony, if not for one important fact. Tony was not just some next employer for Luis. There was a reason why he was babysitting his ass throughout the whole story and cleaning up the mess that he was constantly creating. The answer for why he did that can be found in two subtle moments in the game, which you'll be able to hear now.
Hey, you saved me, man. Made me. Gay Tony will always be the king of this town. You are this town.
If it wasn't for me, you'd be selling dime bags on a street corner. I made you.
As you could hear, it seems as Tony, in the past, saved Luis's ass. And if it wasn't for him, Luis would most likely still be pushing drugs on street corners. Similarly to his two degenerate friends who were pretending to be big tough gangsters in the shady neighborhoods of Liberty City. Luis simply had a lot to thank Tony for. It seems like Tony became a sort of hero to Luis, probably after Tony gave Luis an opportunity, got him out of poverty, and gave him a better life that all the other street thugs could only dream of. So, sure, if we look at the situation strictly business-wise, let's say it would be better if Luis whacked Tony. However, if we take into account the fact that Luis owed Tony a debt of gratitude, and all he had was thanks to him, and apart from that, he treated him like a friend, and for a reason too, no wonder that Luis made such a decision. We all know what Luis is like. It's not easy to impress him. He's got high standards. Tony seriously had to do a lot for him at a certain point. Other than that, we should also throw in one moral rule, that you should never backstab anybody. It's better to tell someone that, yo, I don't want to work with you no more cause you lost your mind, and it's become a pain to do any business with you, and just walk away, rather than conspiring behind that person's back and in the end betraying them. It's an important aspect, not only from a player's point of view and making a right choice, but also from the main characters of the GTA series point of view, who usually are created as good people with good morals, at least as for criminals. So that's why for me, this argument is quite important here. It's also worth mentioning that if Luis betrayed Tony here, he would do it with an enemy, cause Rocco and that Vince prick were nothing more than the antagonists of this game. All those two pricks did was wasting space and air, and from time to time were calling Luis a spick or a taco and having a laugh at him.
Yo, Rock, you invested in the wrong clubs, man. Maybe split sides is more your vibe.
Oh, but I'm sure I would have found that funny if I spoke spick. Real shame, I'll have to ask my maid to translate for me.
So if Luis went to work with those dickheads, that would be too much. The last argument supporting Luis's final decision is that Luis, by agreeing to work with Rocco, completely loses control of his destiny. See, in that scenario, it's all down to Bulgarin. He stays alive in that scenario. It's up to him whether he'll want to kill Luis or not. But if Luis spares Tony, of course, he signs up for an extremely difficult, in fact a suicide mission. Everything is still in his hands, literally, cause he holds a gun in his hands, and based on how good his shooting will be, he'll survive or he will not. So considering that the chances that Bulgarin would forgive Luis were quite slim, it was better for Luis to remain in charge of his destiny and trust in his shooting skills. So to sum up, in my opinion, Luis made a very good and moral call that he spared Tony, but nonetheless, it's a shame that we as players didn't get to decide his fate ourselves. Then, this moment would be definitely talked about more and many people would know the background of it better. And as it is, not many even take up this topic. If not for this episode, I would probably never give it a deeper thought myself. We talked quite a lot about Bulgarin today, so I recommend you to continue with this thread and watch the video on the left, in which we discuss why Nico didn't whack Bulgarin before Luis and take him down himself. Meanwhile, I'm saying goodbye, take care, and see you soon.